that timestamp no one can change. So I think maybe let's also maintain the debate at that level. So I'll give you opportunity as the last one, and then we go into the next presentation.
Tomorrow. The issue I think you succinctly captured is that he's talking about permissionless innovation. I think there's an important thing that we as stakeholders must take to heart. In the habit of wanting to put government as the only actor, whereas we are all responsible for our lives as individual stakeholder groups, wherever we are. So it became a very interesting point to make when you mentioned that RBZ is doing something. But that doesn't stop us from doing something. Well, they are doing something. Because these institutions we have are very susceptible to capture by the officers of those institutions, because they are only human. So we'll wait for an institution when in fact we are waiting for a human being who takes forever before actually giving us a solution. And we've cost ourselves as a nation. So the point I wanted to make to him is that years back when the regulator was being formed, the regulator was actually trying to make sure that there are no barriers to entry into this sector. And yet they went on to create such big barriers that any new entrants would find it difficult. So now the permissionless innovation, the role of the regulator that Mr. Mujuru talked about, became one and still is one that is frustrated because of the interpretation which were done in those fields. So the call to stakeholders is that let's not wait for somebody else to do it. Let's do it, and then leapfrog the nations that they wait for, so that we have our own systems working for us, regardless of the delays by other stakeholders. Especially in this field of technology, government will always be catching up because of the nature of government. So you can't stop innovation because you're waiting for even the regulator to catch up. The regulator right now is a frustration to innovators. I know in the case of mobile virtual network operators, there have been lots of youngsters waiting for 10 years for the regulator to open the field for them to do it. So the call is on stakeholders, the private sector, the civic society.
That's a presentation by Tendai, who's going to look at cyber, a global perspective. I'm happy that there is a calling from defense, you know, and I think most of the time when we talk about cyber crimes, the quick thing that comes into our minds is defense, but give a round of applause for Tendai.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tendai Marekereke. I work as a lecturer at Harare Institute of Technology in the Information and Assurance Department. So today I'm going to talk about cyber crimes. So basically I'm going to go through some statistics about cyber crime, and then I'm going to go into the new and emerging threats with relation to cyber crimes, and then I'm going to look at cybercrime policy and the different regulations which are being used in the world. And then I'll look at some of the challenges which have been highlighted and pose a few questions that maybe we can discuss with relation to cybercrime governance. So essentially, cybercrime can be defined as a computer that is a crime that that is done using a computer or a network. And then there are two dimensions to cybercrimes. There are cybercrimes usually for financial reasons, and then there are some cybercrimes which are done as a form of terrorism, cyber terrorism, mainly for political reasons or other reasons such as hacktivism or trying to cause harm to different people. So some of the statistics about cybercrime. Cybercrime is the second most reported form of crime in the world. And usually, when there's ransomware, the average amount that's demanded is usually approximately $1,000. And of all the cybercrime in the world, 81% is usually the cause of weak passwords. And it's projected that cybercrime would have will cost the world $6 trillion annually. So that's the cost of cybercrime. And then with relation to Zimbabwe, one of the most common forms of cybercrime is where the card closed. So that's one of the major cybercrimes which are happening in Zimbabwe. And according to the RBZ, it's contributing a significant factor. They don't mention the figure, but to the 1.8 billion that is being used in illicit trade is being contributed by. And then currently, in terms of global cybercrime, the money that is being transacted in the illegal online markets amounts to approximately 860 billion. And then the amount that's being traded in trade secrets, intellectual property thefts amounts to 100 billion, and then amounts to 160. And then in crimeware, which is cybercrime as a service, there are actually people who work in offering cybercrime as a service. It's amounting to 1.6 billion, and it's a growing business. And then in ransomware, it amounts to 1 billion. So the total revenues of cybercrime currently amount to $1.5 trillion globally. And then with relation to Africa, I don't know if you can see that clearly, the total amount as of 2017 was 3.5 billion United States dollars. This is according to Serianu, which is one of the organizations which published the annual cybersecurity report. They're based out of Kenya. Unfortunately, they don't have the data for Zimbabwe. That's one area which we're lacking. I'm going to talk about that. And the main motivations behind the attacks, the financial reasons, which amounts to about 77.5% of all cybercrime. And then second is cyber espionage carried out by state nations. It amounts to 18.8%, and then followed by cyber warfare, which is outright warfare. There's a difference between espionage and warfare. Warfare is outright attacking another country, and then espionage is trying to get information about another country. And then the last reason is usually hacktivism. This is a form of activism over the internet through the use of computers. And then globally, some of the major data breaches to date, the biggest one to date that has been recorded is Yahoo, which had 3 billion users' data being leaked. That was between the period of 2013 to 2014, and it was only brought to light 2017. So for all those years, they've been hiding the fact that they got hacked. And I'm going to talk about measures that we can bring about to try to regulate how companies should inform when they have been hacked. The most popular ones, which happened last week, is Facebook, 7 million users' data being compromised. about some of the emerging forms of cybercrime and cyber terrorism. Number one is one which you're all aware of, is ransomware. It continues to grow. The different iterations which are coming out, and it's going to continue being a problem. Two is organized cybercrime syndicates with dark web markets. So essentially, traditionally been happening in the physical world, where you have your mafia controlling certain elements of crime and people paying certain things done. So that has moved now to the cyber world. And they are what are known as dark web markets, where you can actually buy different kinds of things. You can even buy a gun, you can order to get someone assassinated. But this is outside the scope of this presentation. I could have shown you how they actually do it. Known as threats. This is a new emerging field, and this encompasses topics like the one we've discussed, fake news, bots, which are automated social accounts. You get a Twitter account, which you say when someone types or when someone posts a tweet, it will tweet negative things about that person. It will automatically send cyberbullying. And I'm going to show you an example of one of the most severe cases I've come across. And then number four, there's something called IoT attacks. There's been a lot of talk about Internet of Things. And I like to call it the Internet of Risks. Because it's essentially, the more devices we are putting online, the more risk we are bringing into our life. The vector grows by the more devices that we put online. And then the fifth one is crypto mining or cryptojacking. So the previous speaker spoke about cryptocurrency, and he talked about the different ways of authenticating transactions, basically. He talked about proof of work, proof of stake. And to do that proof of work, you have what is known as mining cryptocurrency. It requires a lot of computational power. So what hackers are doing are, they're hacking your devices, and then when you don't know, they're using your device to mine cryptocurrency. So if you ever come across a time whereby your computer starts operating on high, and you hear the fan going off, and you don't actually know what's happening, someone might be actually using your computer to mine cryptocurrency. So it can happen by either a malware being installed on your laptop, or it can actually be a browser, a website hijacking your browser to mine cryptocurrency without your knowledge. So this will result in a very high electricity bill. You don't know what you're doing. You just know you just get a very high electricity bill. So this is one of the most common emerging cyber crimes. So I'll highlight some of them. For example, fake news. So there's a market for generating fake news. So I'll just go through some of the examples. This is from a research by Trend Micro. So the cost for instigating a street protest via social media, via fake news, it costs 200,000 United States dollars. So there are actually people who are out there who are waiting to create fake news to be able to motivate people to do certain things. Comments for articles, if you want 20,000 comments on an article online, you pay $5,000 US. And then if you want your YouTube video to go viral, essentially what it means to go viral is for you to get to trending. I'll show you a picture just now. And to discredit a journalist, it's $55,000 US. And to poison a Twitter account, it costs $240. Basically, what it means to poison a Twitter account is to get fake followers. So imagine you get followers, you get 200,000 followers, and 8,000 of them are fake. The next day you wake up and you want to go to a company and say, no, I have this many followers, so let's agree on a deal or market your products. And then the next day you find out you don't have those 80,000 anymore. They've all gone because they were fake followers. And an example of fake news, if you open your YouTube trending videos, you will notice the number 2 or number 3 article, the number 2 or number 3 video will always be a fake news. For example, the one I have here is the one who says VP Chiwenga rushed to top private or hospital. This came out when he was actually inside a Politburo meeting. And this is an example of fake news. So the reason they do this is to generate a certain opinion in private media, or to generate revenue through a lot of likes on these social media platforms. And one of the strangest emerging form of cybercrime, Mr. Mchuru talked about child online safety. There's something called the Blue Whale Challenge. You can Google it. So what was happening is, it's a game, but it's a suicide game. It's a game with a twist. So the main theme is, if you play this game, you might end up dying. So it's targeted towards teens. So they get particular tasks to do. Usually they involve self-harm. And eventually the last task would be to commit suicide. So this is an example of the new emerging forms of cyber crimes and how can we regulate these forms of cyber threats. So to date, there are 150 teens which have died. Some of the countries confirmed so far: Kenya, India, Egypt, Iran, Italy, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Tunisia, and the USA.
Equal measure?
No. Kenya is 1%. The other countries, they differ. But it was mainly in Europe. It started out in Russia. The person who started the game has so far been arrested. But the game keeps on going. And then in terms of regulation of the internet, there's something called GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation. It came out of the EU. It's a policy which tries to protect consumers. So in a nutshell, what it does is it mandates the rights of individuals and what can be done with their data. One of the main things it has is an opt-in for all companies which have a record of your data. You need to know that they have your data, and you need to know what they do with that data. So I'm sure all of you in the past 2 months you were flooded with messages of GDPR. If you use a service which has to host their servers in Europe, I'm sure some of you have come across those emails. So one of the things that it requires is breach reporting. So when there's a data breach, it requires that the company reports that a data breach has happened, and they inform the responsible authority. And one of the sticking points that is causing a lot of controversy is the fine. It has fines between 10 to 20 million euros whenever a data breach happens. And some of that money has to go to the consumer. Saying this guy, he talks too much online, or maybe he says certain things online, or maybe he exposes certain things online. So the credit score will vary depending on how you interact on social media. So I don't know how they're going to use it and how they will execute the plan, but this is one of the plans that they have. And then recently the ITU and AU had a summit on cybercrime management. And some of the challenges that they found out was that there's a lack of common understanding in terms of cybercrime and criminal justice authorities. So that's your legislators or your prosecutors. And then there's lack of cybercrime legislation harmonization. The definition of cybercrimes is not uniform across the different policies which are there in different countries, and that needs to be fixed. And it's hard to keep up with new technological paradigms. So for example, you have laws which deal with a computer or a computer system, but everything is moving to the cloud. How do we handle those changes which are happening? How do we handle things such as darknets or virtual currencies such as Bitcoin? How do we handle the Internet of Things? We have a definition of a computer being a laptop or a mobile phone. But how do we handle when we have a device such as a flash disk which can connect to the Internet and send and receive requests? So it changes the whole legal perspective of cybercrime. And statistics, we lack statistics of the actual crimes which are happening, the actual cases which have been prosecuted or which have gone through our courts. Maybe the next speaker will be able to highlight on those things in terms of Zimbabwean courts. And there's a lack of proper training for all the personnel involved, be it the police, be it the expert witnesses, be it the judges. So we are dealing with an area where most of the people don't understand how it works. And we have limited technical capabilities to support a successful investigation. So that's why you end up having most of the cases, like for example, card fraud. I recently heard from a guy from a different bank saying none of the cases have been able to be prosecuted successfully because they lack the proper technical capabilities to collect the evidence. And then there's lack of international cooperation. At a recent conference I was, the police were saying there is no cooperation with different organizations such as Twitter or Facebook. You might want to investigate a particular account, but Twitter will refuse to give you access to that account because those organizations are outside our jurisdiction. So that's one of the main challenges. And then in conclusion, these are some of the policy propositions that maybe we can discuss here. Number one, data breach disclosure. Do you think it's possible for us to enforce our companies to disclose when they have been hacked? So that in turn, they better secure the network so that they don't get hacked in the future. And then number two, information sharing between entities. So here entities can refer to a company or organization. So when I say information sharing, I'm talking about threat intelligence. So there are certain variations of malware and they have a certain way of how they work. So wouldn't it be better to say organization A is able to share that data with organization B? And then perhaps we can have fines against companies for data breaches similar to how GDPR works. Or perhaps we can have our own credit score, similar to how China is doing it. And in this ever-changing, dynamic world, you've heard everything I've talked about. How can we regulate in an information age where information is constantly changing? And then number six, this is something that needs to be done. If there's someone with power here, I don't think at this day and age we should be having bank cards which are magnetic stripe only. Just by introducing pin and chip cards, we'll eliminate, just an assumption, but we'll eliminate almost 50% of all cybercrime in Zimbabwe, just by introducing pin and chip cards. And then finally, increasing training and awareness of cyber security. I know everyone says that, but perhaps is there a way that we can enforce this in terms of policy? I know in organizations they have to do certain audits or penetration tests as a policy matter. Could we also have something like this where, as a policy, we increase training and awareness in terms of cyber security so that we can reduce cybercrime in our nation? Thank you.
Right, a round of applause for Tendai on cyber security. Personally, I don't have problems losing money, but information. Thank you, my WhatsApp. I'm no mirror motion. Okay, I think the presentation by Tendai and the presentation by our next speaker, I think they've got a relationship, because I think the next presentation we're going to talk about cyber laws, of which a good host of them will also address issues to do with cybersecurity. I think Tendai gave us a global perspective of cybersecurity, getting an idea of what's happening out there. And then maybe we'll try and also zero in with that through the next presentation. I think as our speaker comes up, I think I'll just take 2 reactions as he sets himself up. Any thoughts around cyber security? Okay, I think we have a speaker here.
Mine is just a variation on those propositions which are given on the policies that are being proposed there. I feel that the best way is to train people, to have people being aware of the cyber crimes or on how to have cyber security. Because if you look at coming up with some policies that really govern how people interact, honestly speaking, it infringes someone's rights. I'm afraid, instead of looking on securing people alone, some of these policies may end up even affecting the people at large.
Thank you. So I think it's a recommendation there about how to structure policies that security. But the debate continues. I think this is why we're here today. Different stakeholders with different perspectives and different interests to protect. Let's say a bit more thoughts. Wouldn't you want to know how to protect your data on your phone from what's close to you?
I work within the cybersecurity field as a penetration tester. So one of the challenges I face most of the time, especially when you go to institutions and try to tell them you have a problem, they are now saying you have, which is not the case. You're trying to tell them, look, you have a data breach, all the data is out there, can you please fix this? But most of the time, the reaction is, we've been hacked, it's now a crisis. And I think we should be able to conscientize our institutions, especially governments, to be more open to the idea that they can be hacked and some people are out there trying to help.
Okay, very interesting perspectives there. Any other thoughts? Okay, I have. I'll take that one as the last one as we go into the laws that are governing the space. I think I need to be able to send myself via cyberspace. It's taken me a long time. Is this where the end was?
Hon J Muswere is my name, representing Global Network Point. I think this is an interesting topic, but the most important thing, it's not a question, but it's, I'd say, a contribution. It's a network administrator. If, like what my colleague they say, if I see a loophole in the network and I come and tell you, we should be able, as network administrators, to take that advice and try to protect the network. Because most of the times, it's all about defending our territory.
Thank you very much. I think one thought we also want to be ringing in our heads is that there are certain aspects and phenomena that are not new in our human existence. Security, for example, is not a new area. The way we interact, etiquette, Mr. Njuru was talking about netiquette, etiquette online, the way we protect ourselves, if I've got belongings, the way I protect them, what do I do? A lot of this isn't new, but how come we are unable to seamlessly translate offline behavior online? It's not a question for you, it was just a thought.
You can make your contribution.
Okay, I think mine is a quick one. around the issue of cyber law. I know there's going to be another contribution coming through towards the same topic, without necessarily preempting it. But I think it will be very exciting and interesting if we would know today how many people have been necessarily prosecuted in Zimbabwe against crimes of the internet violations. And how legal is the legality, especially when we actually have a new cyber bill? You know, I know there's been a lot of, should I call it harassment or charges, way before the cyber bill was passed through. And what law are we supposed to be using to then persecute someone who's found to have broken the law? Because before that, you cannot break a law that has not yet been implemented. Just thinking out loud.
I should also be interested to hear about the how legal is the legality of it's an interesting one. I think we will let Ms. Muswere here address some of the issues that have been raised regarding the legal terrain when it comes to the way we interact online. So let's just put our hands together for Boy is here next his presentation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. Thank you for having me here. So the beauty of presenting towards the end is that half of my presentation is now no longer relevant. So I am now just sort of polishing off on what other presenters have already touched on. And maybe we can start with just a small stop there. So cybercrime, as the previous speaker said, relates to the use of computers or the internet to carry out criminal activities. So basically, and this is answering you in sort of a step-by-step way. If we watch, like me, Western movies, like cowboy movies, you would remember that whenever there was a bank heist, people in the old days would then use horses to giddy up and run away with the loot or run away with the gold. But then when the car was invented, what happened? Bank robbers no longer use horses to get away, they now use cars. The crime is still more or less the same, but the expediency after the crime has changed because technology has advanced. And that's more or less what's happening with some elements of cybercrime. So cybercrime, in my mind, fits two categories, two neat categories. The first category is laws that are against computer systems. So that's your hacking, that's your disrupting of computer systems using viruses and attacking national ICT systems. So for example, if our national grid on ZESA is run by a computer system and someone attacks that, that's the cyber terrorism and the hacktivism that Tendai was talking about. Then the second set, or the second type of cybercrime, is laws that are actually facilitated by computers. So these are sort of what we have been seeing in Zimbabwe. Because of the nature of our own country, the nature of our own economy, the nature of our own society, we've seen a lot more of card cloning, a lot more of identity theft, we've seen a lot more of hate speech, defamation and everything. And that has also reflected in the nature of prosecutions that we've seen in the courts. We are really yet, and I stand to be corrected, we're yet to see someone going to court for hacking into Net1's national data center, for example. But we are likely to see someone in court, and indeed we did see someone go to court last week for defamation. So in actual fact, when you look at it, The reason why it's a cyber crime and reported as such is because the crime was carried out using a computer system. It was over Twitter, which is computer-based or internet-based. So at this point in time in Zimbabwe, that's where we are. So the prosecutions that we've seen don't necessarily need the introduction of a cyber crimes bill or a data protection bill or anything, because the current laws that we have in place, namely Chapter 8 of the Criminal Law Code, as well as Part 11 of the Post and Telecommunications Act, are enough to cater for most of the computer facilitated crime that we're seeing. So I don't know whether that answers your question. As to figures, I don't have specific figures of how many people have been prosecuted, but as I was saying in my example, the crimes have always been taking place. Defamation has always been a problem in Zimbabwe, for example, but it's now changed from being defamation on the written page to being defamation over social media. So that's something that we need to sort of discuss when we go out into the community, when Technomag writes its articles. Those are some of the nuances that we need to point out. Because there was a lot of conversation around the case that happened last week, where someone is accused or is before the courts for defaming Justice Chikumba. People were saying things like, he just got arrested over a retweet. So in people's minds, the activity that got the guy in trouble wasn't the content of the tweet, because we have, after all, in the Constitution, the right to free expression. But what we forget is that, like any other right, these rights are limited. So if the right to free expression is limited offline, if there are certain things that you can't say to my face, because those things would insult my or infringe on my right to dignity, that also carries for the online space as well. So in our conversation about cybercrime in Zimbabwe and cyber legislation, we've sort of missed that link. We've sort of focused on the delivery and thought that was where the problem was. But it's not about the delivery of a message. Defamation was wrong before we had computers. Defamation is still wrong after we've got computers. So let's start to have discussions at a level that people can understand. And then that's part of what my talk is now about, because as I indicated, a lot of the things have been touched on. The problem with Zimbabwean cyber laws isn't that we're totally unprotected or partially protected. For now, the sort of crimes that we're seeing take place can adequately be prosecuted and genuinely be prosecuted with those two provisions or those two parts from the Criminal Law Code. The problem with those laws now is that they have a one-size-fits-all approach. Mr. The right to privacy is the right to freedom of expression. So all if ever Zimbabwe advances to that point, our laws will have to cater for those different brackets or for those different sectors of the online community. And in that regard, our laws are now about a lot of crimes that we are only starting to understand. And our laws are totally not fit for purpose to prosecute those crimes. What is cryptocurrency? We don't even have a law that defines that. Is it an asset? So if someone does a crypto jack on my wallet, did they steal my property? Did they steal my funds? Is it a financial crime? Is it a traditional crime? What exactly is it? So those are sort of the things that we now still need to start discussing. And with that in mind, we need to address the last point on my slide, which is people do not understand or know about the cyber laws that we have right now. And as the Internet Governance Forum, the National Internet Governance Forum, it's good for us to meet in hotels, wear our suits, interface with government. But most of us are here because we already have an interest. We already are on this journey to know more about our digital rights, to be active about our digital rights and to protect those digital rights. But the people that are affected the most, the people that will just know about a law when they've been arrested for a Facebook post, for example, we need to go out into those communities. We need to sit down with those people. We need to help them understand that WhatsApp, Facebook are just one more way in which they are interfacing with the internet. In our work as MISA, we have random discussions with community-based organizations. And when you say to people, how many people are on the internet, for example, people my age will raise their hands because they either have access to the internet at work, at school, or at university. But then when they put down their hands, and then you say how many people are on Facebook or WhatsApp, almost 3/4 of the hands in the room go up, including the hands that had not gone up when you asked about who's on the internet. So those sort of things, to us, are things that we now take for granted. And it will not help if we as a group and the people that we represent keep moving forward and leaving those people behind. Let's sort of drop the jargon, let's drop the technical speak, and all start at the level that
Thank you. A round of applause for Cuba. That was very sweet, short, straight to the point. But my suit, I felt a little bit of a pinch about the people in suits. Lots of us here just remember that.
But suits tend to intimidate people. That's the thing.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you for that presentation. I was listening, hoping that you would tell us exactly where we are as a country with the enactment of the cyber laws. There's a set of them. And one of the things that I was listening out is because I heard that once you have a new parliament and you haven't passed the bill in the whole parliament, then you're starting from the beginning. So I know some work was done. I don't know whether we can build on that work, but we are actually starting from zero again. The second question, while I appreciate that the Post and Telecommunications Act does cover some aspects of what might be called cyber law, I'm aware that there was some recent initiative to update or amend the Post and Telecommunications Act. I wonder also whether you could shed light on that, specifically on whether the cyber law aspect of it has been updated or it still remains what it was in the old act. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm sure Koda, you have taken note of those questions. I think we'll just take two. More and then we just. I don't know if Mr. Njuri might want to also come in on the question that has been asked. Give you maybe time to prepare as well. Or you let Koda do it. Pardon? Or you let Koda do it. Address the questions.
Maybe Koda could hit first and then.
Okay, great. So I think we'll just take two more. Are there any other burning issues around our cyber laws. From what I gather from Kuda, a lot of these things have always been crimes. Now that they are being done using computers, this is what upgrades them into being called cyber crimes. I know, for example, a very typical one, and you forgive me for bringing back this one, but I heard that it's responsible for a huge chunk of our data. This country, possession of pornographic material has always been illegal, isn't it? I don't know the extent to which we would find people on the other side of the law if we were to do a random check. I mean, it's just it's a thought. It's just a thought. If it's responsible for a big chunk of the data. Okay, that's fine. I think maybe you can handle that, and then we can move on.
Yeah. The two questions. The first question about the cyber laws. When the previous minister, was before the law to the Attorney General's office for drafting. So all along, those laws have been ministerial drafts, and then they have to be submitted to the AG's office, and the AG's office sort of polishes them up in preparation for them to be submitted before Parliament. And so in February, you say they've been submitted to the AG's office. Then the AG's office suggested strongly that the laws no longer be three separate bills. The Data Protection Bill, the Cyber Crimes Bill, and the E-Transactions Bill. It has to be thrown away. It's an option that the new Parliament has, but it's an option they can choose not to exercise. So based on President Nangaba's speech, we probably will see the bills discussed. And also in the morning, the Deputy Minister did make reference to the bills and said members of the public were welcome to come and make contributions. So.
Thank you. Good. Maybe whilst you're still holding the mic, as we wait for our next presenter on cost and access, we'll just squeeze in this late breaker question or input.
My name is Patrick from Tech and Zip. Is there any dangers from using old laws in the digital space? Let's say, for example, schools in Harare, they are...
In one sentence.
There's really no danger if those laws are flexible enough and if those laws are definite. Because the issue now is that, for example, Section 95 of the Criminal Law Code, which is in the court case that's currently ongoing technological advancements. So some laws we can...
Time, we are going now into...
To the question on the bills, because I think the real world environment, There's introduced committee grant.
And then we'll cut that in two and give it also to Solomon as he comes in. Wise use of resources. Okay, I think this is one topic that's very close to our hearts, and I think we've been talking about it. This issue to do with percentages and so forth. So take about that. Okay, you're going to avoid the 2%.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah. So here representing Internet Society Zimbabwe chapter. I'm going to talk about the issues of internet costs and access, and how as the Zimbabwe chapter we're trying to experiment with a number of different models. But I'm going to focus mostly on less talked about model known as the Commons Infrastructure model. Okay. For those not in the know, the Internet Society is a global voluntary organization that was started in 1992 by Vincef and Bob Kahn, and its values are around creating an internet by the people, for the people. And so everyone is free to join. The Zimbabwean chapter was chartered in 2003, so we are like 5 years old, and our thrust is on providing grassroots advocacy, as well as exploring alternative off-grid approaches to internet access. So my talk is going to touch on essentially three things. I'm going to talk on what we are doing as a chapter in the now term, what we are trying to do, and that will be around the issue of peer-to-peer sharing. And then we'll also, I'll also share with you what we are also doing in the medium to long term around the concept of community networks. And then lastly, I'm going to share my thoughts on what I think we ought to focus on in the long term in terms of the concept that someone even mentioned earlier on not just being consumers, but also becoming prosumers, which are producers and consumers at the same time. Okay. Actually, I think we can skip that. Right. So in 2008, ISO Global has embarked on what we call campaigns, advocacy campaigns. And these 4 campaigns include what we're actually doing, that is promoting Internet Governance Forum. The other campaign revolves around securing the Internet of Things, because the Internet of Things is the buzzword these days, and issues relating to security are also important. So ISOC is working with an organization, is working with an organization to develop a framework. So during the course of 2019, we'll be holding a number of workshops to go through that framework that was developed to secure the Internet of Things. And another campaign revolves around securing the global routing system. So we have something that we're calling MANAs, which is short for mutually agreed norms for routing security. So again, actually we have an event that is slated for end of November, so we'll actually keep you posted on the developments. And then last but not least, we have campaigns around community networks. Actually, community networks form the bulk of our emphasis for 2018. So, maybe before I move to that, community networks are essentially networks that are created, community-driven networks actually, where we go into a community, we identify the needs of the community and try to have local community members becoming internet service providers. So let's not talk about a case study that we're actually doing in one of the rural areas, but maybe before I get to that, let me start off with what we are trying to do in the now term. Now, So, in line with the government's thrust on devolution, our community networks working group decided to explore the less explored area of user sharing. Because if you go through the ITU's 6 degrees of sharing, a number of models are put out, but one that we decided to focus on is that of user sharing. And we want to leverage on what we already have so that there is minimum investment on infrastructure. So according to the UN previously SDGs, one of the things that was picked out was 85% of the people in developing countries are already covered by a mobile signal. So we wanted to leverage on that, and we embarked on exploring the idea of peer-to-peer sharing. Now, if you look to at the diagram to your right, you can see that a network has been created, we call it a heterogeneous network, would be created between users within a community. I'll give you an example. Suppose we have guys who are living in an affluent area, let's just say Borodo, that are on fixed plans. Maybe you're paying $120 per month. And then just across you have guys in Headroad, and maybe you have a student from UZ who can hardly pay for the internet, for the data bundles. Now, the guys from across the road who are on fixed plans can choose to share their excess bandwidth, right, with the guys across. But the question comes, why should they share their bandwidth if they are paying for it? Now, because of one dimension of the blockchain that was mentioned, that it allows us to have incentive-based systems, it's now possible that you can actually create a peer-to-peer network where, without having a central authority controlling your network, you can just have a network created. Maybe a typical example would be Shade. Shade, where we create our own network to directly share videos. Now we'll be creating a mesh network within an area. So you can have the guys with fixed plans actually sharing their excess bandwidth and getting paid. Now we're working with a company called RightMesh, which has developed this platform where you just install the RightMesh application on your phone, and you can create a network. And how the system works is, as you're accessing another person's excess bandwidth, you have to exchange coins. Now, unfortunately, we were a bit, we were not slow. We were deemed to be, as Zimbabwe, we were deemed to be blockchain unfriendly because of what had transpired towards the end of last year. And we ended up losing out on that pilot to Uganda. Apparently, at the same time, in May, Uganda had hosted the Blockchain Africa, and President Muswere actually came out strongly supporting blockchain and actually promising that they would invest quite some resources to investigate the technology. So I was hoping the PEMSEC was here because, as it is, it appears we are a blockchain unfriendly country, and it's probably because there's very little information that is known. So as a chapter, we're going to continue to advocate for the use of blockchain, and we hope that the responsible policymakers can also take this up. So this one project, we're still pursuing the project as one option of having users within a community sharing internet, and in the process being incentivized using blockchain tokens. Okay, and the other thing that we are also working on is the traditional community networks. So we're fortunate as a chapter to be one of the 3 countries to be case studied for community networks. So we're actually in the process of setting up a community network in Murambinda. We're working with a group called Murambinda Works. So the picture at the top there is actually a container that we will use to set up the local ISP. And we are also going to, just 2 weeks back, Facebook and Internet Society struck a deal, and they will be investing a lot of resources in setting up local IXP. So it's another project that we're going to be exploring as a chapter. And then locally, we also have a community networks working group that people are free to join so that you can get more information as to what we are doing and how we intend to achieve our goals on community networks. And we are also actively involved in a global working group that is part of the Internet Research Task Force. Internet Research Task Force is another arm of ISO Global. And another thing that we are also going to set up in November is the ZINO, the Zimbabwe Network Operators Group, where we'll try to bring in all the big and small network operators on a common forum so that we can discuss issues that relate to network operators. Now, in terms of the long term, the opportunities that ISOC is providing in the long term, just doing some history, and I discovered that the first industrial revolution, the steam engine was the thing that sort of drove the first industrial revolution, and then the second one we had electricity, and then the third one we had the computer. But in all those revolutions, we didn't have a society that was promoting this. And I suppose in the first revolutions we were not yet colonized, so there was no way we could be part of the first and second industrial revolution. But now we have a society, so this is what I'm imploring, that now we have a society that is promoting the key driver of the fourth industrial revolution, which is the internet. And this provides an opportunity for us to actually to actively take part as producers and not just as consumers as we did even in the third industrial revolution. You saw that in the third industrial revolution, a lot of Asian companies that previously were not part of the global giants took that up. And so this is an opportunity that ISOC is providing us. I'm looking at 4 key elements that are part of the fourth industrial revolution. There's the issue of open source software, right? And I also feel that we are not doing as much as we can to capitalize on that. I'm not one for Windows versus Linux. I believe that we ought to use proprietary and open software. But I feel there are lots of opportunities in the open source world that we are not taking advantage of. There's also the open source concept is even moved to hardware, right? We have lots of hardware that is now being open sourced. We have things like the Arduino boards. We have things like the RISC-V chips, for example. So again, they present quite some opportunities for us to actively take part in the in the fourth industrial revolution. Okay? And then another opportunity that ISO provides is the Internet Engineering Task Force. I just listed a few of the important ethos of the IETF, particularly that everyone can participate. IETF is responsible for developing the internet standards. Okay. But it appears, particularly in Africa, the Asian guys are quite actively involved in development of internet standards. And it's one thing that we are also trying to push. So we've set up our local IETF group, and I would also want to invite you to be part of the group. There are lots of fellowship grants that are available for travel. And so I'm hoping that we can have people applying for some of these grants. And then lastly, I was talking of the common infrastructure model. It's based on the fact that most of the conventional wisdom that we had about experts has been turned over its head. So I've heard of the famous Oxford experiment where a bunch of experts were grouped against a bunch of villagers. Now, it has turned out that having a small size of experts is not as good as having a huge amount of commons. Again, a scientific example is the PageRank algorithm that Google uses. Way back, we used to focus on powerful algorithms and less data, but we figured that we don't really need powerful algorithms. What we really need is more data. So most of the work that we are doing is based on focusing on the commons, because most of the discussions that we are having, it's really mostly us, the experts. We rarely involve the common person on the ground. So, just to conclude, I'll share with you a project that we've started. We've actually started 2 projects in Bari. We're focusing on these common guys in Bari. So, we are looking at alternative, again, based on the conventional wisdom being turned over its head. We're looking at our educational system, and we are thinking our educational system is no longer suited with the direction we want to take, because our educational system was designed for mass production. We are now beyond the era of mass production. So we started this in 2015, where we started this concept of makerspaces. We are complementing the traditional school system. So we started an IoT makerspace, which was running as an after-schools project. And one of the interesting things is the guy we see in the picture. This is the religious studies teacher. He came to us one day. He was complaining about one of the students. He was saying one of the students that are spending most of the time here is actually my worst student. I've even asked the mother to not to take her to A-level because he's a hopeless student. And then when you mentioned the name, I just took him to the superior general, and I asked him, can you ask who our best student in the makerspace is? Apparently, it was that West student. Okay, and we actually realized that maybe this was another Einstein. Was looking at the story of Einstein. Einstein was it was concluded that he was a hopeless case. So it's one of our success stories. As we speak, this student, one of the students, one of the guys in the background, is actually enrolled for a diploma in software engineering at the UZ. We actually had a chance to go to the UZ to do a presentation on a guy from Bari with no idea of what a pasture is, and they were putting together an IoT system that was controlling a fish, a mini aquaponic system. So, as it is, the same guy who was complaining is now based in Makumbi. He called us just last week and he was saying, can we also replicate the same makerspace concept in Makumbi? So I think in the next few months we'll be moving over. So in a nutshell, these are some of the things that we are trying to experiment with. We are mostly a grassroots experimental group of people, and we are hoping that we can have the input of most of us in the IGF. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Solo. Very interesting projects. Access in a different dimension, isn't it? Any thoughts after this presentation? Sure.
Thank you very much. That's a very illuminating and interesting presentation, particularly the last one on the community networks. What went through my mind was, do you have any comparative analysis of the cost, reliability and quality of access that you provide set against what traditional, in quotes, networks would provide on GSM or fiber? So we can appreciate a bit more of what you're actually doing and how it improves and compares with what would be the traditional way. The second question that I thought was, there is a universal service fund which is hosted at Portras, and I wondered whether you are accessing that fund to support your community-based work. And when that thought came, I
also decided to tease a comment from you on your experience of the government-led community information centers, how these compare as alternative to what you're doing, because you seem to be taking the internet right to the people, whereas these community information centers seem to be taking the internet to the township, so that people can go to the township to access the internet. Thank you very much.
Sure. I think that one was a loaded question or questions. Any other thoughts? I'm sure we can drop in one more. I think our time is racing with us as well, but we are trying to balance that with also creating the opportunity to dialogue. If you are ready, Solo, you could address these.
Okay. In terms of the comparative analysis, the Murambinda project is just started. So actually, we are now working with Tier 1. So I don't have the other figures of the other comparative operators, right? And then as for the Universal Service Fund, yes, we are so much aware of that. But just like what someone mentioned earlier, that is there something that we can do on our own before we access some of these funds? We understand the universal service funds are being used for the community information centers. That's why we decided to start our peer-to-peer experiments, which does not necessarily require us to access the USF funds for now. But it is actually in the pipeline. We are hoping that if the funds are still available, we talked to a number of guys in Portras, and they alerted us that part of the funds were, I'm sure Mr. Mjuru would confirm that they are already committed to the community information centers. And then the third question on how different is our makerspace concept to the community information centers. I'm not so privy to the details of how the community information centers operate, so it's going to be difficult for me to actually compare. I understand they are like kiosks in Isasu, yeah, but our trust is we have actually identified an area, the IoT, and we are trying to push the idea of developing IoT projects. So ours is focused mostly on IoT related development. I hope I answered you. So I said yeah. So I think that's it.
Are there any other thoughts? I know this is the graveyard shift, and yeah, often we might need a bit more megabytes to get us going, but it's still good. I'm hoping that we're still together even through to tomorrow. It would make even more sense for us to continue tomorrow. If you've come today, it makes more sense for you to come than not to come, you see. Because tomorrow is where we're going to try and make sense of the things we're discussing today and package them into something that can actually take us forward. So I'm not too worried about if there's no feedback right now. I know that the, what do you call that thing that processes on the computer, the ROM deal. Internet. I'm sure we are processing some of the things we've been hearing throughout the day today. But maybe as we reach the end of the day today, maybe I could just take the opportunity to just stand in for Advocate Magai as indicated there in your program, and then maybe just try and capture some of the key issues that we looked at today as we go into tomorrow. But before I do that, I think it would be important to remind ourselves again what the objective of the forum is, so that we are guided accordingly. accordingly tomorrow when we convene in terms of charting a way forward. I mentioned this before, that it may not necessarily be a platform where we educate each other about the intrinsics of certain technologies as such, but rather we want to look more around the governance environment of the internet. So yes, here and there, we might go slightly deeper into certain technologies, but that's not the idea of the forum really. The idea of the forum is to represent the broader interests of different stakeholder groups and see what we can do to influence the governance environment, influence policy wherever we can from a multi-stakeholder approach. So that's sort of like the idea. So I just thought I would, re-emphasize that again so that we can appreciate what the idea is. But maybe just going into some of the key presentations that were made today, I think we had an opportunity to discuss briefly around child online security, and I would like to also bring into this discussion some of the discussions that happened offline, and by offline I mean those that happened outside this room. We have some colleagues also asking where the children's organizations, they should be here, they should also be hearing this and seeing how it interfaces with their mandates, which is well and good. I think it would be a good idea if they can also be privy to the outcome of this meeting, number one. But at the same time, I think we need to appreciate that as different stakeholders, I think when Mr. Mjuru presented, he did take note of the need for different actors to also be sensitive to the needs of our children online. So I think there were some recommendations from the guidelines for government, recommendations for actors within the private sector, recommendations for actors even in the academic sector, which also is a clarion call to action on all of us to remember that in one way or the other we do interface with a part of the internet that also comes into contact with children. More than that, I know some of us here are also parents. It's also something that we need to think about in terms of how we are supporting the protection of our children as they interface with these online technologies, as they are in these online spaces. So that's actually something that's very important. But more so as we go into tomorrow, we also want to discuss what the gaps are in these areas. What the gaps are in these areas and what it is we can do as a multi-stakeholder group. But as we go back, what we can also do as different stakeholders. Kate spoke as well about the digital economy, which is quite interesting as we were trying also to grapple with the degree to which we are interfacing with the digital economy. How much are we doing? Is there a conducive environment for inclusion? I think many years ago there was a buzzword, Kate, where we spoke about financial inclusion. And we know with the nature of leapfrogging that our technology has, we ended up having some members of the population that were unbanked, and then suddenly, they've got their very first bank account in the form of a mobile wallet, for example. So this digital inclusion, how much of it is being promoted and is the environment conducive? I'm happy that this fora has got a very strong presence of the regulator. And I think when you talk about the operating environment, I think a very crucial actor, apart from the users, is also the regulator. I'm sure you agree with me. And I think right now we are currently grappling with an issue that has something to do with our online or our issues to do with the inclusion in terms of the financial space, and everything seems to be going online now. So I found that to be a very interesting area that we also need to weigh in as various stakeholders and represent the different sections from which we are coming from. I think we also went on and we spoke about the emerging technologies, blockchain. I think this one left a lot of people hanging. We still need to understand a little more about what blockchain is, what can it do for us, but I was particularly intrigued by the interest of our permanent secretary in this technology. And for sure, I think when we look at some of the applications that have started to build on top of blockchain, you know, they've presented a regulatory nightmare. It's very difficult. I think Mr. Mujuru raised the point to do with how regulating some of these things is something to do with jurisdiction. You know, someone commits a crime and they are in America. How do you prosecute them, and so forth and so forth. So I think when we are talking about blockchain, those are some of the issues that are coming up. I think from the discussions that we're having, there seems to be those thoughts that are coming up that, you know, who is controlling this? To what extent can we be able to acquire a stake in the control? How do we protect our own people as they interface with some of these technologies? And I think these are issues that are important for a multi-stakeholder group such as ours. But at the same time, there are certain technologies that are just way too in our faces to forget, you know, or to just push on the side. You know, we just have to interface with some of these technologies, and I think it's important. Colleagues also spoke about the need to set up task forces, you know, that can start looking into some of these technologies. And I think the very nature of our technologies is such that they are increasingly evolving at an accelerated rate. So we also need to up our game in terms of our ability to shorten the curve that we go around when we're learning about some of these technologies. Then maybe just lastly, I will touch on the last presentation by Solo, where he spoke about cost and access. I will bet some of you, when you heard the topic like me, I thought he's going to tell us about how much WhatsApp costs, how much an SMS costs, you know. But we didn't hear that, you know. I was expecting to see graphs, you know, around how much mobile operator A is charging, mobile operator B is charging, and how are we accessing the internet, but I think we saw a different take on access and costs. And I think what particularly stood out for me was, you know, aspects to do with the community network, you know, and also sharing the bandwidth. I think these are models that are coming into the market. They are presenting opportunities for Zimbabwe. I think Mr. Majla spoke about connecting the next billion. You know, could these be some of the solutions that Zimbabwe needs to start thinking about in terms of connecting the next billion? I think if last year but one, we were saying that in other parts of the world, and I think Zimbabwe included, it has now become very expensive to connect those that have not yet been connected to date. And probably the last mile will be achieved by approaches such as community networks. I wouldn't know. I think this is the duty of this forum, to look into some of these issues, look at their possibilities, how feasible are they, and also get a better understanding of how we can replicate what's actually happening in other countries. So I think in a nutshell, those are some of the issues we dealt with today, and here's hoping that you were able to pick one or two things out of the discussion we are having today. Obviously, we are not expecting that you take everything that has been discussed here to be useful to you, but at the very least, if you are able to represent your stakeholder group, I think the forum would have done its work. So tomorrow, I meant to understand that we need to convene at 8:30 so that we're able to conduct the business of the day and actually conclude. So I would urge all of us to arrive on time so that we're able to conduct our business and conclude. This is just 2 days. So I hope that it will not be too taxing on you or some of the work schedules or commitments that you have had earlier. But otherwise, in conclusion, let me just take this opportunity to thank you all for coming. And I would like also to thank our online audiences that have been with us today, that have been following this. We hope that tomorrow when we have deliberations, you'll be able to join us through asking questions or making contributions. We are also in the privilege of connecting with our online partners through Technomec, which is where the live feed was going. And some of the recorded sessions from today will also be found there. I think they will also be found on other platforms later on, but for now I think on Technomec is where we are finding them. So thank you so much. Famba Shaganaka Amba Kathleen Zabonana Sasa. Hasta mañana. Right, just some parting words. I'm informed here that tomorrow, if you so prefer and so wish, please bring a friend, but just one. If it's before 8:30, if you arrive here before 8:30, you can bring a friend. A plus one. One. Thank you.
Yes, you are, and you've been watching us live on the Zimbabwe Internet Governance Forum of the ZIGF 2018. What a very insightful meetup that we've been having here with the internet players here in Zimbabwe. And over to you, the ZIGF, I understand you are the chairman. Has this been according to your expectation as far as this whole thing is concerned?
Yes. We managed to have an interaction with the key policymaker, our ministry, which is one of the mandates of the forum, to create a dialogue between the players and the policymakers themselves. And one of the key highlights was where we had the ministry taking questions direct from the floor and prepared questions and dealing with the issues as they are emerging in the market themselves. And we had the talks which were found to be helpful for the market itself.
One of the most consistent questions that keeps coming year in and year out is how powerful and relevant is ZIGF in as far as driving and pushing policymakers with all these very strong issues that we've been discussing right here. To what extent does the ZIGF has any power or impact to make sure that this can be driven, or is it's just a discussion forum, so to say? How do you respond to such questions?
True, ZIGF is a discussion forum, but remember the mandate of ZIGF is not set just for discussion. It's a United Nations recognized forum for discussion. Yes, it's for discussion, but the input is not just for the government. We also report to the Southern Africa Internet Governance Forum, which is under SADC itself, and to the Africa Internet Governance Forum, which is under African Union itself, and to the United Nations, which is to the International Internet Governance Forum, which is convened by the United Nations. So all those forums, key government players, decision makers from different countries are part of those. So in as much as it's discussion, yes, because we are not a decision-making entity, we bring stakeholders together to create and develop awareness of current issues and also discussion of those issues. That's why you find within ZIGF, it's made up by representatives from both government, private sector. And adding to those two, we have also representatives from academia, civic society, and the populace at large, which have equal decision-making within the ZIGF itself. And the convener of ZIGF is the government itself, currently. Yeah. So they take it seriously, as you have heard from our engineer Kundishora. He's actually the one who launched ZIGF in 2015. So they take it serious. But to trace, was this decision made because of ZIGF? That is pretty impossible. But yes, we add to the fore of the discussion in terms of policy in Zimbabwe and globally at large.
Interesting. So yes, this is you've got it, viewers. ZIGF 2015 to ZIGF 2018. This is as far as the Zimbabwean sector has managed to just move on as far as driving through the internet side. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for the time. Do you have any answers that we have for our viewers?
Be responsible on the internet, make money through the internet. Thank you, sir.
I will make money. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks. Thanks for your time. All right. Yes. Thank you.
Maybe good that you can handle that. You can move on.
Two questions. First question about